Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where I can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 38 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, and today's episode is on the psychology of cuteness, and it is the 12th of June 2020 as I record this. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're going to be looking at the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and there's some very interesting articles, to be honest. So the first one is, "Involvement in workplace democracy can alter your view of authority." So, authoritarianism as a trait tends to be thought of as an enduring part of a person's personality, but can this deference to authority be changed? According to a new work in Nature Communications, it can, at least in the short term. In studies conducted with textile workers in China and administrative staff at a university in the United States, researchers found that encouraging workers to attend weekly democratic meetings led to a significant change in the way they feel about authority, justice, and participation. So I actually went into this article a bit more, and it turns out that, well, quite strangely, when the Chinese workers actually went into these meetings, when they actually attended them, they were actually more submissive to authority, or no, not submissive, they complied a lot more with authority because they felt as if they were listened to, which I think needs to be applied to all contexts, because if you're not feeling like you're being listened to, appreciated, or valued, also known as human branding in my case, then you are much more likely to rebel. So that's always quite interesting. And then the next one isn't, I'm going to butcher this name, sorry, is so psilocybin alters brain levels of the neurotransmitter glutamate, and this could explain why users experience ego dissolution. Recent therapeutic trials of classical psychedelic drugs such as psilocybin from magic mushroom or LSD have reported benefits to well-being, depression, and anxiety. Note, I'm not telling you should do this in the slightest. These effects seem to be linked to a sense of ego dissolution, a dissolvement of the subjective boundaries between the self and the wider world. However, the neurochemistry behind these effects has been unclear. Now, a new paper published in Neuropsychopharmacology, wow, that's a big word, suggests that changes in brain levels of the neurotransmitter glutamate, I've just changed that in pronunciation, are key to understanding reports of ego dissolution and perhaps the therapeutic effects of psychedelics. So, it's actually quite good that we now at least partly understand why psychedelics do have this beneficial, I'm gonna use that term because it's what the professionals have used. So it's quite interesting that now we actually know something about why these are beneficial. But again, of course, the biological side is only one side of the argument, and still the cognitive and social aspect should always be included in research or looked at. And something that is very appropriate right now, and I always commend the British Psychological Society for being quite timely in their stuff, at least in terms of the Research Digest, is actually, young children believe intervening in antisocial behaviour is the universal duty. Adults do not, and this can be seen today with coronavirus and the Black Lives Matter, which I would just like to say again. I partly don't think I made it that clear in the beginning of, just in last week's episode. I do stand with the Black Lives Matters. When witnessing harmful behaviour, most of us hope for intervention of some kind. If we see someone receiving abuse on public transport, for example, it's likely we want to see some action taken. Who we want to intervene in such acts, however, is more divisive. Some believe social norms should be enforced by authorities, whilst others stress that responsibility should be shared amongst us all. There's an automatic problem there, the diffusion of responsibility. So in short, bystander effect, we are much less likely to help people if there's others around, because the problem with this is that, if you believe that the responsibility should be shared amongst us all, that will very rarely work, because everyone will pretty much shrug it off saying, why am I responsible? Why can't they do something? And if that's the person that's sitting next to you. So back to the article. An interesting example of this is the discussion around policing, with anti-abortionists arguing that much of the work done by the police would be better left by the communities themselves. Our politics may inform our stance. According to a new study, similar to age, the team finds that older children and adults seem to tend to see norm reinforcement as the responsibility of authorities, whilst young children see it as universal. So that I think is very interesting, and I think the thing to say here is that, well, yes, it is the job of the authorities to enforce laws and everything, but some things that should not be done are not in law. For example, off the top of my head, there aren't any examples, but we all know there are some things that we think people shouldn't do, but it's not in law. So I think that, yes, we need to let the authorities do their bit and enforce their stuff, but it's also down to us as a society and as people to take responsibility and also make sure that those are held responsible. So that is it from the psychology news section. So let's move on to the very quick personal update. Moving on to the personal update for this week, it'll be very short because there's not really been any psychology related stuff, and yes, I am trying to make this more psychology focused, this personal update, because sometimes I just go off on tangents because I do so many non-psychology bits. So like in terms of the only bit to do with psychology, to be honest, is that I had a social and developmental exam, an introduction one, which I thought was quite interesting. But I think the whole online thing, and this I am going to mention because it's sort of futurist, is that, well, the whole online thing did work rather well in this case. I don't expect it to apply for everything, but I think the whole online assessment thing could be quite valid in the future because, and something I'm quite pleased with, is that universities were very, very quick about this. They pretty much had the infrastructure already laid out. I'm sure that's actually quite wrong, but something that I really like about universities, and if anyone works at a university, I thank you because you really did do a lot of great work. Because as I understand it, and yes, I don't have that much knowledge except what I've heard of in the news and except from friends and families, that the school system, at least in the UK, was not quick whatsoever because, as far as I know, no exams happened this year, and I couldn't really understand why exams couldn't have been done online for school children. Because yes, you've got the disparity that some people didn't have access to the internet or such and such, but the schools could have made that position if they really tried. I know that was probably an awful point and quite ignorant, but quite a few people do have access to a laptop or the internet at home, so I don't know, I think schools could have been better, and this is quite a controversial point maybe, but I just think that, I don't know, to be honest, the whole point is here was just thank you, universities. And then on the only personal note that is not psychology related is that this week I've been doing quite a lot towards my writer brand because I'm soon going to be launching a books for writers brand, and because none of you are going to be interested in that, I'll keep this bit very short. But something I'm preparing for all of you because you're all part of my psychology audience, as always. Thank you very much. It is always much appreciated. So in the next week or two, I'm going to be setting up Patreon for you wonderful psychology audience and listeners. So what happens is that for $1 or $2 a month, or however much you want to pay, you get bonuses, and you get rewards for sponsoring my time and everything on the podcast on a monthly basis. For example, if you pay a certain amount, I'm still getting the details sorted, but you'll get discount codes maybe. I'm not sure if that's one or like, is that for the writer brand? Don't know, I've been doing so much like this week. Maybe you'll get free books as they're released. Really do forget what I've added, what I've done for the psychology bit, but you've got that to look forward to. This was a very quick personal update. So, as always, if you want to contact me, you can always email me at connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net, or you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley. Yeah, so the book that I want to highlight is A Guide to Mental Health and Treatment Around the World, which I've got to retitle at some point, probably when I do a second edition, because this was, God, this came out on the 21st of August last year, so I might think about doing an update, but to be honest, that's not something in my future, for now at least. So the book is A Guide to Mental Health and Treatment Around the World, a global look at depression, So this, I actually quite liked this book. This was a real quite pleasure thing, like, to be honest. So the description goes: how does culture affect people's beliefs about depression and the treatment of depression? That's the focus of this book as we travel around the world, exploring how different cultures treat mental health, as well as the unique treatment that certain cultures have for depression. The countries or regions we'll be exploring are Japan, China, Eastern European, Italy, Africa, and Uganda, with reference to mental health in Western societies. So please join me on this journey of discovery as we explore how culture impacts global mental health. The knowledge is worth sharing. And this book, now just reading it, I do actually remember how much I enjoyed it, because it was actually a really good, interesting book, like, to read and to write. Right, so this is available on Amazon exclusively at the moment. I will try and get it out to the other major ebook stores. So I hope you've enjoyed the personal update. So let's move on to the content part of today's episode. Moving on to the content part of today's episode, we're going to be looking at cuteness. So this also includes the psychology of cuteness, and I don't know, to be honest, it's basically any way you want to look at cuteness. So I admit this is a completely random article that I found at the Psychology Today website, so it should be interesting. So cuteness is very important because it really does affect all of our lives. And cuteness started in Japan. For example, you had those cats with those massive eyes, and personally, I don't find them that cute, but some people really do. And then it spread to East Asia, and then the idea of cuteness and cute products and everything made it into the wider world. And this led to cuteness being permeating, because cuteness is everywhere. Everything from fashion, because you can have cute handbags, even though they're quite unpractical because they're tiny, so how can you fit anything into it? Well, if there's anyone who has that handbag, please contact me and just tell me. And then there are tons of other cute products for men and for women. So that's quite an interesting idea. And then you've got cute food, which is tiny, and then you've got tons of other ideas of cuteness. But cuteness is a massive idea in society, and the reason for this is because it sells. If you create a cute product, it sells a lot better compared to ugly products, because who wants an ugly product? And this is also called cuteness engineering, where a company really tries to create a cute product to help people buy it, and people just love it. But psychology still plays a massive role here, like it does in all parts of life. So in terms of cuteness, psychology comes in because of Loris, which, if you read Dead Elemental Psychology, is a researcher with Bolan, I've probably butchered that name, for attachment. And yes, Lauren and Darwin believe that cuteness was an adaptive behaviour because it can melt the toughest heart, as they say, as well as it can turn people into devoted carers or caregivers. And that's actually quite important in terms of evolution, because we need to be able to become caring, and just so we can look after people and ensure that the next generation survives. Because if a baby wasn't cute, then who would really want to look after it? And yes, back in the wild times, which actually sounds awful now, if there wasn't a cute baby and if nobody wanted to look after it, or if no one was caring towards it, that baby would probably die, and that baby would not ensure the survival of the species. So that's one way that psychology is denoting cuteness. But there are some other ways. For example, Sherman, Handit, and Cohen, 2009, found that compared to a control group, when people were shown cute animal pictures and then played a game of Operation, you know, that little buzzing game where you go in with tweezers, and if you hit the side, it buzzes. I'm not going to make a buzz sound on this podcast. Yeah, so then they found they were more careful when playing the game. So that seems to support the evolutionary idea. And then there are a number of ways how adding more cuteness to your life, this is where the article takes quite a weird turn, is that, well, it does have a few benefits. For example, Nitto in all 2012, they found something quite interesting. So if you look at cute photos of animals and everything before you actually do a task that requires concentration, you'd be careful and accurate. If you look at those photos, it actually makes you more careful and it helps with concentration and accuracy before you do that task. And that I thought was really weird and quite interesting. And then something else that I really quite liked was if you're around with a really annoying person, and so there are a lot of them sometimes, especially if you go to certain places, then instead of trying to get annoyed and instead of triggering your defensive systems, if you imagine that they're cute when they're younger, or you just try and imagine them as cuter, then well, it can actually bring out your empathy side. That's what the article said, and so that was a really interesting thought. So I know this was quite a whirlwind tour of cuteness, but I hope you found today's article useful. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.